everybody, and welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm your host, Diane Gibbs, and I am a designer. I have my own company as well as I teach graphic design at the University of South Alabama. And I teach graphic design. And I am joined today with Nikki Villagomez, and has also taught graphic design, but she has also started a chapter of AIGA. And the reason she started a chapter was the same reason I started Design Recharge, was really just to get designers connected and connecting. And so today, there is not a AIGA, which is American Institute for Graphic Arts. Um, there is not an AIGA chapter in our area. So this is something, the closest one for me is in New Orleans. So I'm gonna pick Nikki's brain about how she actually did that, but I'm gonna let her kind of tell you about her background, and what she's doing now, and she actually travels and talks and speaks at AIGA chapter too. So, all right, Nikki, give them a little bit of background.
Okay. I have my BFA from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge in graphic design. And after I graduated from LSU, I got married and moved to New York and worked for 3 years in Manhattan at two different companies. And the last year we were in New York City, my husband got his master's in architecture from Columbia University, and he was offered a job in Columbia, South Carolina when he graduated. So we moved to South Carolina, which is my home state. It's where I'm from. And we lived there for 9 years. I freelanced and taught at the University of South Carolina. I taught graphic design and typography. And 2 years ago, we moved to Ohio, which is where I am currently. There's snow outside. And I am a senior designer for Dixon Hughes Goodman. So that's where I'm at now. I'm my full-time job is working for healthcare consulting, doing their design deliverables.
Cool. So when you moved to New York, did you get involved in AIGA
hmm
there?
My first involvement with AIGA was actually as a student member at the New Orleans chapter, which is what's close to you, the closest chapter to you. So I was a student member while I was a student at LSU, and we traveled to a couple events. It was about an hour and a half from Baton Rouge. So I was a student member, and then when I moved to New York, I transferred my membership to the New York City chapter. And then moving to South Carolina, there was no chapter. So the closest chapters to Columbia were the AIGA Charlotte chapter, which was an hour and a half away, and then the Atlanta chapter, which was 3 hours away. And both chapters are pretty active and had really great events, but most events, as you know, are on a Thursday night at 6 o'clock. And so it's a big commitment if you don't live in the vicinity of the area to go to these events. And then they always serve drinks, and it's like, trying to figure out how you get back home without, drinking and driving. So that's an issue too. So that's so yes. So then I'm currently a member of the Cleveland chapter, which is about half hour from where I am now, from where I work.
So when in that 9 years that you were in Columbia,
Yes.
how many years in did you decide, hey, I want this, I need this, I'm gonna start this?
It was about 3 months in. Um, about 3 months because when I left New York, I had worked full time for 3 years, and my husband had a full time job. So I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to freelance. And what I learned was it's actually really hard to freelance when you don't know anybody, when we don't have any clients. So I thought the best way to meet people and to get clients was to go to AIGA events. That was kind of what I had been groomed to believe as a student, and then in the New York chapter. So that's when I started looking around and saw there were no there wasn't anything local. So I looked into what it would take to start a chapter. So it took this was in I started trying to get it going the summer, late fall-ish of 2003, and the South Carolina chapter launched with our first event in September of 2004.
Wow.
So it's a process. It
Yeah.
was definitely a process, but
So
that's how it didn't take long for me to want to do it, but it took a long time to actually get it going and make it legit.
What was the biggest struggle? Because it took about a year, I guess, maybe a little over a
Right,
couple
right.
months extra.
hmm
What was the biggest struggle in starting a chapter?
The biggest struggle in starting the chapter was you have to have by AIGA standards 20 signatures to start a chapter. And the disconnect for me was the signatures that they needed have to be professional members. And now there's all these tiers with memberships that AIGA has just rolled out. But when I was starting the chapter, it was either you're a student member or you're a professional member. So I was getting students to join to sign this petition. I was getting professionals to sign this petition. I got up to 20 and they sent it back and rejected it and said, no, they have to be 20 professionals. So then I started again. And because there was no AIGA chapter, when a professional joined, they had to actually join the organization, which is 300 and something dollars. So you're asking a lot of somebody to put down that kind of money when there's nothing going on yet and they don't even know who I am. I'm just this new girl in town. So that was a huge struggle for me, was getting those 20 signatures. That's what took a lot of time and a lot of convincing, was who are the right people to go to sign this piece of paper.
Were most people familiar already with AIGA, or did some people had they never heard of it?
Most designers know about AIGA. I think it's rare if you're in our profession and you've never heard of AIGA. I think that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah.
So yes, they were aware of AIGA. There was another organization that was just kind of just specific to Columbia, CCAS, Columbia um, Communications Arts Society. It was just a group of people because there was nothing local. They kind of came together and started their own group. So that at the time that AIGA South Carolina was getting going, that group was kind of fizzling out in a way, like everyone was kind of burned out. So it came along at the right time, and I tapped into that group to kind of get going because they had a lot of connections. But getting those 20 signatures was tough.
I can imagine. So now they've really changed, and this happened this past fall or this past summer,
Yes.
where they changed their
hmm
tier. It was like student membership fee is $50. You have to be
Yep.
connected with a university. You have to have a guide. You can't just be all students. And I think that's
Right.
still the same case. But then
Yep.
you have to be connected, just like with any of them. You're trying to be connected with a specific chapter. You're going to get their promotions. You're going to get their emails, things like that. Um, but now they've changed it so there are more tiers, and it's not as much of this huge investment of funds. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that tiering system or why they did that, but I am really thankful that they did something like that. And I'm going to try to pull up that site real quick and plop
I
that up.
think they had to. I think they needed to do something like that because it's a lot of money to ask people with the way the economy is to lay out several $100s for even though we believe in the organization, it's just still it's a lot of money to lay
Yes,
out. So I think it was important that they came up with these tiers, and I think it's a really great solution.
definitely. I'm trying to find the um, IMA. So this is how they're breaking it down. I think. Let me see. Oh, become here we go. I'm looking at their site, trying to figure it out. I'll send this. I'll plop this up. But there's the trustee, which is the $209 a month or $2,500 a year. There's a design leader, which is $500 a year, which is $42 a month. There's the sustaining member, which they say is um, the most popular, I guess, and which is $250 a year. Um, and you get a little bit of extra when you do the other two above that, but that's $21 a month. And then a supporter is $150 a year, $13 a month, and they have a lot less. They have about a little over half of all of the benefits. And then a contributor is $50 a year, which the students actually become part of that contributor thing, which I think um, is really great. But I'm going to plop this URL up too.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was important that they did that.
Yeah, well, it helps out people, especially in this economy, to still want to stay connected. Because so, what are some of the benefits? You had been part of the student chapter in New Orleans. You went to New York.
Hmm.
You were part of the Manhattan chapter. What made
Hmm.
you think this is, and it is more than just networking, but what are some of those
Yeah.
benefits that made you like, I've got to start an AIGA thing and not another organization?
I think for me, being a student member and seeing how beneficial it is as a student and what I got out of it, and then being a professional member for 3 years and seeing what I got out of it in that respect, um, I felt like South Carolina had a big enough design community that we had no reason to not have a chapter of our own to sustain a chapter. And I the best things that came out of it is just that once a month networking where you're so in a room surrounded by like-minded creatives that you just have that instant connection with because you share so much in common. And there's a lot to be said for having that. I mean, the same thing with this design recharge. It's just there's a feeling you get from it. It just gives you that extra that you need to keep going. And I really started feeling like I was missing that because I went to a lot of the events in New York and I really loved them. And I thought there's no reason why South Carolina can't have that. And so I really wanted to bring it there. And I thought, well, if I'm freelancing right now, I have time to do this. So I thought, how hard can it be? Can't be that hard.
Well,
And it turns out it was actually really hard, but that's okay.
but you stayed in, you didn't give up, which I think is awesome.
Right.
I am on this kick this semester about like just stay in the race, just keep going, even when you don't feel like it. Just keep
Yeah.
going, just keep getting those signatures or whatever. But one thing I think is
Right.
so Charlotte is in North Carolina, and you said that was about
Correct.
an hour
An hour
away,
and a half.
hour and a half.
Hmm.
Again, this isn't really doable when you're trying to you work till
Right.
5:30, 6 o'clock, and then you're trying to make it to an event at 6 o'clock that's an hour and a half away.
Right.
um so I'm with you because New Orleans is about 2 hours away, and then Birmingham is 4 hours away. So I'm with you
Okay.
on the it's too hard to travel that far. um when I can only imagine, I mean, I'm glad that you had that really stability in, you'd seen it as a student, you'd seen it as working, you were working at a design firm in New York, but then coming and doing freelance, it's so critical to stay connected to other designers, to have other people to show work,
Yes.
or to just get feedback, or to just like me and you will talk on the phone sometimes, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like I feel like I've known you for forever just because we get jazzed up about certain things. But when you show me what you're working on,
Right.
and I follow her in a lot of other areas, which we'll share those later. But when you see that stuff, it is that continual encouragement. So I can only imagine if
Yes.
you had that really support your whole design career, to come and now you're freelancing, you're wiped out of the other people in your office, and now you're
Yep.
working alone. So I can
Yep.
understand why you stayed in that race and why you just got this done, because it was so important. So
Yes.
I'm glad you did. But did you have other people who were really on board from the beginning and really helping, or did you feel like you were like Joan of Arc in there alone?
There's another designer in Colombia, and I wrote on Facebook prior to this, Bob, if your ears start burning, you'll know why. Bob Wirtz in Columbia, South Carolina, he was my vice president, and the two of us just rolled up our sleeves and we got to work. And he had been in Colombia a lot longer, so he knew a lot of people to go to and a lot of sponsors to ask to help get us going that I would have no way of knowing.
Right.
And Bob, so I served as president for 2 years, and then Bob was president 2 years after me. So, and he's been an active part of AIGA since then. So the two of us together, and I think that was the other thing is that we didn't have this massive board. It was really just him and I in the beginning. So it wasn't a lot of pointing fingers, who's going to get it done, who's accountable for this. It was just me and him. So if I didn't do it, I knew he was going to be able to do it and vice versa. There was no, "God, I hope he does it. I hope he makes those phone calls he said he was going to do." Or so to be able to do it and have somebody on my side that was as passionate as me was it was I'm very thankful for that. And we've stayed good friends, I think, because we've been through that battle together, you know?
Yeah, and it is. I mean, that's a long time to just try to get something going. Um,
Yeah.
did you have anybody in AIGA that was kind of mentoring you to help you with these ins and outs? I know that there is
Um,
an AIGA. I'm going to put this on the screen. But did you have a specific
yes.
person that was helping you with kind of figuring it out?
Yes. So George Fernandez is in the national. He's the staff of AIJ National. He works in New York City in the office there, and he is part of the membership on the membership committee. So anytime I had a question about people joining, or if somebody had a question about how to join or anything, I would go to George, and he was very helpful. And Denise Wood is another one that's in the national chapter of the national organization that works in New York that was also very helpful and answering a lot of questions. They sent me all the materials that I needed to hand out at events to get it going. And the other thing I did that was very helpful is in the summer, they have a leadership retreat for all the chapters. So they pick a city, and board members from all the chapters from across the country come to this city for 3 or 4 days and talk about what's coming down from national, what are the changes, what's happening on a local level, what's going good, what's not going good. So I attended the leadership retreat the summer before our chapter launched. So our chapter hadn't even been official yet, and I was at this leadership retreat. And that to me was extremely helpful because I got to hear from chapters that had been around for a really long time, what was going good, what wasn't going good, ideas for events that we could have. So that was really helpful. So the first year going to that leadership retreat was really great.
Cool. So, okay. So, one of the big challenges was getting the signatures. So Bob kind of had the ins and outs about the community, the design community that already existed.
Yeah.
How so
Hmm.
you had to get people, and it was a lot of money they had to invest when there wasn't something they could
Right.
do. Was that one of the biggest challenges, or what was another challenge in just trying to build that community? Or did they already kind of go to
With
this other CCAS thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think just convincing people that they didn't know who I was. I was young. I was 27 years old, so I was the youngest president at the time. I think I was the youngest founder of a chapter. So, who is this girl? Why should we believe anything you have to say? You're asking for a lot of money. What's going to happen? So, I needed to have a couple events built that I could say, we're going to have these events in the next few months that you have to look forward to. And that was another thing, is that I was so passionate about because I know as a member, if I'm paying 300 and something dollars to be part of an organization, it pissed me off when I was in New York and I had to pay money at the door to go to like $20 if I'm a member to go to an event that I'm already paying several $100s a year. That made me so mad. So that was definitely one of the things that I said from the very beginning. As long as I'm president of the South Carolina chapter, you will never get charged at the door for an event, because I truly believed that was just ridiculous. That's my personal thought. Um, so that resonated with a lot of people, to not have to pay at the door, that all events would be free. And then, trying to, as the chapter grew, trying to have events also in Greenville. Columbia is located in the center of the state. So having events in Greenville, South Carolina, which is in the west part of the state, and then having events in Charleston on the east part of the state, just so everybody could benefit from having a chapter that was about the whole state of South Carolina.
That's cool. So, what was your first event? What were your big pulls that you were trying to get people and how do you pay for those things? I mean, did they give you a certain amount of money even though I don't know. Can you give us a
So the way that works, yeah, so the way that works is the chapter gets a percentage of all of the members. So if I'm paying as a member of the South Carolina chapter, 300, and I forget what it was at the time. I think it was $295. AIGA South Carolina would get a check from National that was about $90 or something like that per. So we would get a portion of that membership money. So we would have that money coming in. And then we were able to secure sponsors that would give us $500 for the year. Um, I think that's what it was. We had a couple of those. So we had enough money to cover a few flights. So our first event was Alexander Isley. And so he came and did our big inaugural event. We had it at the Columbia Museum of Art. It was very, very nice. And I think the museum donated the space to bad mourners and save money, but that was our big event. The next event was the one event that we inherited from that organization, the CCAS. And it's our annual competition. It's we call it the In Show, and so it's only open to South Carolina designers, and that is the only event that we ask people to would pay to submit their artwork to be judged. And so that is the big money maker for the entire year. Usually In Show would fuel the rest of our programs. So we had enough money to bring in Alexander Isley and have food and drinks and stuff at the Columbia Museum of Art. And then the next month was In Show, and so we got a lot of money from that because that was a very successful event, having that competition. People love entering competitions.
Yeah.
And then after that was the culture exchange, and I had met Bonnie, who was the president at the time of the Honolulu chapter at the leadership retreat that I was telling you about in the
I
summer.
just put the wrong
And
one on. Sorry.
oh, that's okay. I had sent Diane a bunch of images of all the different events that we had. Yeah, so that's Bonnie on the left there holding up the South Carolina state flag. So I had met her and I had introduced myself to her, saying, "Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm the president of the South Carolina chapter that's almost about to launch." And she said, "Hi, I'm Bonnie. I'm the president of the Honolulu chapter." And that's been my dream destination forever. And so I have no way of going there anytime soon. So I thought it'd be really neat to do a culture exchange where we would put anything and everything in a box that had to do with South Carolina, including a lot of the pieces from In Show, which were pieces designed by South Carolina designers for South Carolina clients.
Cool.
And can I drag this window? Is that right?
Yes.
You just drag it to the side?
And drag it so that it's either over the chat or wherever you want it to live.
Yeah.
That's a great thing about
Okay.
screencasts. So
Cool. So we had this culture exchange, and then they sent us a box for our December event. So it was a very cheap event in terms of cost, but it was a really neat event because we opened this box and everybody got leis. She sent sand from Waikiki, but then she also sent pieces designed by Hawaiian designers for Hawaiian clients. And I was just really spellbound by the pieces that they just felt and looked like Hawaii. And so that's kind of where my whole blog came from, which is my WordPress site.
which I
It
will
was
drop
kind of spun off of this one event.
Yeah, so and her WordPress, her blog is right here, so you can actually click on it. I'm going to leave it up here. I'll also put it in the chat. But it was this huge
So
kind of impetus
that was a great
of
event.
this
So at this
other
point, we had
thing that,
had the Alexander, go ahead.
no, no, no.
We had had
It was just a
the,
good start for your,
oh yeah, for my blog. Um, so we had 3 events. We had had the Alexander Isley, the In Show, and then the Culture Exchange. So there was reputation now that we were legit. There were events going back to back. And so after that, we had Ed Murrieta come from the Cartoon Network. That was our event in January. And that was really fun. So that drew out, he got a huge turnout for that. And I think um, most of our events from then on were held at the University of South Carolina, and they donated the auditorium. So that was awesome. Um, my husband's an architect, so we had an event where we joined forces with the AIA chapter in Columbia, and we brought in Joshua Ramos, which is that piece you had up earlier. He's an architect for OMA, Office of Metropolitan Architecture, and he did the Seattle Public Library. And that was a really neat event for me to show that AIGA events they don't have to be about graphic design. We brought in an illustrator. We're bringing in an architect. Um, we brought in House Industries, who they do the hand design typography. So I was it was really important to me to bring in different types of creatives, not just the typical designer. But my goal was to have somebody every single month, and we did. And the 2 years I was president, we got a really great reputation for the events we had. We brought in Chip Kidd, we brought in James Victori, which his poster is the
Got it.
the crazy look one, yeah. And that one was fun because I was actually in New York visiting New York City and went to his office in Brooklyn to pick up the files for this, and so I got to hang out with him and get these files. And he's just a class act guy, so it was really neat. Seymour Quast was another one from Pushpin. It looks like he did a hand illustration of the guy wearing the boxer shorts. Um, yeah, and that was a fun one. That one got a really big turnout just because he's so famous. He's so well known um, in our industry. And Tim Hale from Fossil, that was neat because he got to design the posts. He did the postcards, and he did a series, so it was 4 separate postcards, and we mailed them. That's the other thing. We didn't have Facebook or Twitter. Everything was either by email or by regular mail to get the word out. And so it was really fun for me to try to um, have different types of mailers go out, whether it's a poster or a postcard, or just to get people excited about it. So let's see, Seymour Quast, Chip Kidd. And then the next year we did in December, the culture exchange was with Las Vegas. So I had done Hawaii the previous year. So I was on the hunt at the leadership retreat to make friends with a president of another chapter that would be willing to do this crazy exchange. So I made friends with the president of the Las Vegas chapter, and it was just, again, it was so neat to open this box and have such a different vibe come out of it than Hawaii. Hawaii was very quiet and very blues. The colors were very organic. The type choices were very soft and subtle. And then Las Vegas, and it's like I needed to be disinfected. Opening this box with all this crazy stuff coming out. But their design pieces were very bold, very in your face, big bold colors. Everything, it just felt like Vegas. And so again, that's what kind of led to my blog. But um, that was another event that it was an inexpensive event, but we're still having events every month. So at the beginning of the chapter, when Alexander Isley spoke, which was in September of 2004, we had 31 members that night. By the end of my presidency, 2 years later, Michael Beirut from Pentagram was my last speaker. I was 5 months pregnant with my son. We had 132 members. So it just completely grew quite a bit in the 2 years. And 132 members for Columbia, South Carolina is a pretty good amount. But the best thing for me that came out of it, one of the best, there was a lot of best things, but um, the education chair, I became really good friends with her, Stephanie Nace. She's the head of the design program at the University of South Carolina, and she asked me to speak. She asked me to teach graphic design and then typography as an adjunct. And so I taught graphic design and typography for 5 years at USC, and that was just phenomenal. And so I remember going to events as a student and how lost I felt as a student. I'm so intimidated by all these professionals. So I wanted to find a way to make my students feel at home. So I really encouraged them to help with the setup, the takedown. Whoever was doing really well that month of an event, I would have 2 students come out to dinner with us with the speaker. And so that was really neat that we would get this big group, this big table together, and there'd be a couple students there. And I think that the professionals like that too, having a student at the table, because they're reaching the whole demographic there. So I really tried hard to include students.
I think that's great. I think I remember even just as a young designer, I moved from Auburn, Alabama to Denver, Colorado, and I got involved in AIGA, but it was very intimidating. All these people knew everybody,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it is, I definitely think design can be very incestuous in a way that if it's a really good company, they're probably not going to hire, put an ad out in the newspaper or on a, you know, monster or whatever. They're going to,
Right.
it's word of mouth. And that's why I mean by saying incestuous, I'd rather not hire anybody. I'll just keep doing it until if you hear of somebody. And that's why I tell my students, I was like, just ask to go to show your book around. Don't ask for an interview because they're not hiring anybody, but they might
Right.
see your stuff and be like, "Ooh, I know where you should go." And even if they don't have a position, they might make a position if it's a really good fit. And you know, I just think you gotta just go out and show your book as much. And I still think that when you go and you network at these events as a student, it's great because you're seeing how professionals work, interact with each other, and it's not always this competition. We may be two people competing for the
Right.
same job, but we're not like gonna destroy somebody's piece or I'm not. I mean, that's not the way most designers are. But I think the AIGA, I think that's great that you kind of encourage that, and I do think helping set up and take down and whatever you can do helps you interact with people. So I would definitely encourage that for anybody, not just a student, but any new person to a new area or a new organization, just getting involved. I think that people it it can really benefit.
Oh, for sure.
So you talked about sponsors, and I guess,
Hmm.
my first thing I would be thinking of is printers or paper reps or, anybody that could do anything with the industry that would already
Hmm.
have a impact on the industry. But what did you do, and what would you do today if you were having to find sponsors now?
That was where Bob really helped me because I'm horrible at that. I hate asking for money. I hate doing anything that has to do with money. Is really hard for me. Luckily, we had two big sponsors, Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is an insurance company in the South. And that's actually where Bob works. They were very supportive of AIGA, and even though $500 is a lot of money for AIGA as a nonprofit to receive, for them it's probably a drop in the bucket. It's not that big of a deal, $500, and they can write it off and it supports They had several designers that were members. So it made sense that they supported it. Another organization was Scana, which is a electric electric company and local there. Um, and they also had an in-house design team that was very supportive of AIGA. And they also, contributing that money for them was no big deal. For us, it was huge. And then we would get sponsors that were, what's it called when you do it like in trade? So I think
Barter?
like an in-kind donation kind of
Oh,
thing.
uh-huh.
So we had printers they didn't donate actual cash, but they printed all of our mailers for free.
Right.
Um, and for them, that was great exposure because it's going out to their target market. And they also did us a huge service by printing for free. So
Yeah.
today, if I were looking for sponsors, I think I would go where there's a lot of in-house designers because those are the companies that are willing um, to donate some actual dollars. And then the in-kind donation, printers, I would think because it's a design organization and AIG is very well known, would be more than happy to print a couple, mailers as a donation.
Do you still think you would do as many mailers as you did before, even though there's so much with social media that you can do?
Probably not. Probably not. I have realized with even the events that I've been speaking at lately, it's Twitter and Facebook is the way to promote these days. The mailers are just, I don't know, they don't have the same effect. I just they're fun to get in the mail and they're fun to design, but they don't have the same effect as Twitter, how it gets the word out instantly, and Facebook.
It's just funny because it's so much of, like, the linotype machine. People would, like,
I
I've
know.
never seen it work, but it was like this huge massive technology back whenever it came out. And then now it's like, we have computers, we don't need a linotype machine. So if you were a
Right,
linotype operator, you lost your job. So it's the same way with design.
right,
I am very passionate about making sure that my students understand how to use social media, um, to promote. And because we are not just promoting ourselves, we are promoting our clients. And this is not, it's
right.
not like it's the only thing you need to do. I still think that there are printed things needs to happen. I love print. I still will design in print. And that's why I think posters are great. But I think so much stuff comes in the mail that we just think of
Hmm.
as junk, which we do keep those beautiful pieces, but could our money be spent a little bit better, and we could do more promotion
Right,
and get in touch with more people? Maybe, but I
right.
still think you should get a poster, and I still think, there's other things that you could do
For
at
the
the event
big,
that are
yeah.
printed. But it's just funny because it's really changed. Social
I
media's
know.
taken us by
Taking
storm.
over.
Yeah. Well, and also, my dad worked for Georgia Power for, I don't know, 30 something years. And, they had their own printers in house. And so, think about what I like is that you partnered with people who were not your typical printer, paper rep, things like that. Because that was what I was thinking of. But I think it's great that you did these in house things. But even now, granted, a Georgia Power might not want to print your thing, but they might. They used to do, when I went to tour Georgia Power when I was in school. My dad wanted to prove to me that designers did not use Macintosh. Of course, he was wrong. We were right, but we went to Georgia Power and we toured the whole thing. There was a whole big printer, like 6 color press down in the basement, 4 color. They had a whole bunch of different presses. And then we went to the design area, and it was, I think 5 people, and it was all Macintosh. And so I got to get a Macintosh after that. But they said 90% of the stuff they did was for nonprofits. They would design it,
Yeah,
print it, everything. And so sometimes going to these other places, these in-house places or something, they actually are willing to do it, even these in-kind donations as well as
yeah,
financial money. But also it's these gems. I think that this is something I found with just doing design recharge. I may connect with somebody who may not be in how or in um, print or CA, but they are doing amazing work, but they just, haven't gotten their voice out yet. And I think everybody has
yeah,
something to share for sure. But
yeah.
I have found some people who I think, are just really, really neat. And now they can get their word out. And I know just having people who were these huge big names that people didn't know really is great because it pulls
Hmm.
in more people. But I also think it's great that you were doing something every month. But that takes a ton
Yes.
of work.
Yes. But that was the most important thing to me, was to have events every single month. Even in the summer, we would have like a beer break where we would meet at a bar, but that would never be our main event during the programming year. And then we also had an Adobe event where somebody would come and talk about um, the latest, it was more of like a classroom setting where she would walk us through the new ins and outs of a program. But it was really important to me that with the amount of money that people are paying to be a member, that they got their money's worth. And so having events every month that were free was really important.
What do you think? What was your favorite type of event? Was it more of the education, or was it more of the um, the speaker talking, or what?
The speakers were fun just because it's there's something to be said when you've studied these people in books in college and then they're sitting right next to you in the car and you're picking them up at the airport and it's that was the most fun, was hanging out with these guys behind the scenes. But hearing them and seeing them talk about their work and hearing the backstories of a lot of the projects that you only know the logo, but hearing the backstory behind it, that was really neat for me. Personally, the most fun event were the culture exchange. Those are the ones that really obviously had a big impact on me. But hanging out with the big name speakers, having dinner with Chip Kidd, and going to an antique store with James Victori or Andy Cruz from House. I mean, it's just you can't buy that kind of time with somebody. It was
Right.
that was really neat.
That's cool. Um, what do you think is the biggest draw to AIGA? Do you think it's the like the meetings that are regular in your town, or do you think it's the big events? Um, or
Yeah, I think the national conference is a huge draw for people, and the local events are also really important way to connect within the community. The national is a way to connect on a national level. Um, But I think the huge draw with AIGA is the connection, having a reason to get together with other creatives that you share a profession with, and finding out what's making them tick, what client pissed them off. I can't believe they wanted to make that logo bigger. Just like validating all the things that you think, especially as a freelancer, when you're stuck in your house and thinking, "Am I going crazy that they want another revision?" But being able to talk about it with other designers is a huge draw. And then just being able to go and be inspired by speakers is great. So AAGA really has a wonderful reputation um, across the country. Every chapter, that's the thing that has really taken me by surprise, is how passionate these people on the board members. Everybody's volunteering. Nobody's getting paid for this, but they're doing it because they truly care, and it's really fun to be around people like that.
definitely. Um, I know that you have. I mean, you've done all of that back work. You've done the um,
Yeah,
you had people in, and now you are actually going and talking about the stuff that's on your blog. So how did this come
yeah,
about? And would you have ever thought, you were 27, you said, when you started? Or no, it was, yeah,
yeah.
when you were in Columbia and you were
When I
starting,
started chapter.
did you ever think that you would be giving a talks, like you would be these keynote speakers or these Thursday night speakers that people come and
No,
listen?
no, absolutely not. Not in my wildest dreams. I definitely had long. I'm a big believer in setting goals. That to me is number one. I truly believe if you don't set goals for yourself, nothing's going to happen. I think it's important to have short-term goals,
Mhm.
and it's important to have long-term goals. And usually the long-term goals are the craziest ones because they're like 10 years out. I hope to be doing this. Um, so a long-term goal for me when I was a student was, man, wouldn't it be cool one day to be speaking at one of these things, because it's so neat that you're able to inspire a room full of people. I mean, how neat is that? So never did I think that I would be a speaker. Yes, it was a long-term goal, but I wouldn't be bummed if it didn't happen, but I did set it as a goal. I remember announcing the speakers and thanking sponsors and at the beginning of every event, and my husband would always say, "You sound like you're about to cry. You sound so nervous because you sound like you're about to cry." My voice would shake, and I'm so nervous speaking in front of people. So I don't know. I feel like I'm getting better in terms of speaking in front of people, but it's still I'm a very introverted person. It's still very much outside of my comfort zone to go and speak. But I have a very crazy passion for typography, and so I love to be able to share that with people. And so I'm able to set aside the crazy nervousness and talk about my blog and the crazy typography stuff.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's funny. I get really nervous when I'm speaking in front of my peers. Way more nervous than I
Yes.
do speaking in front of 100, 500 students. That doesn't bother me at all. I guess because
Right.
I think
Yeah.
these people are going to know that I don't know what I'm talking
Oh
about, or
yeah.
they're
Oh
going to
yeah.
think that what I think is really true is not necessarily true. So, and it's
Right.
always that doubt, I think. But I do think it's like being on a bike. The longer you keep pedaling and keep trying, you you're going to get better at it, but you have to stay in the race. You have to keep practicing. And I think that speaking
Yeah.
at big events like this is something you just have to practice. I'm with you on the being nervous and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and as they say, it's the things that screw up, the moments where everything goes wrong, those are the moments you learn from the most. And if you can survive those, then you're okay. I mean, the thing being president of the South Carolina chapter that I struggled with the most was if the speaker's flight was going to be on time, if they made the flight, and how many people are going to show up for the event. Because how awful would it be if you bring in James Victory and 3 people show up?
right.
You just that can't happen. That's not a solution that is even possible. So those are the things that would keep me up the night before. Us, how big of an attendance are we going to have? Is he going to make his flight? Is the weather going to be okay? The things that were out of my control. I can lock in the sponsors. I can lock in um, the promotion for the event, but the things that were out of my control were the things I really struggled with.
Did you try?
Luckily, we never had anybody miss a flight.
Oh, that's good. Did you try to
Yeah.
specifically choose people from like southern areas during the winter months when it would be problematic traveling?
No, no, we were all over the place. We were not specific to regions during times of years. We were we just if they said they could come, we locked them in. And luckily, we never had a problem with anybody making the flight. There was one issue with James Victori's talk that the auditorium at USC, there was a teacher giving an art history lecture, and so the door was locked up until like 20 minutes before. And so everybody was like, all the AIGA, I mean, you can imagine James Victory had a great turnout. Um,
Sure.
was everybody was like out in the hall, and I think the art history they were actually taking a test or something, and so it was just that was very nerve wracking, and he wasn't too happy about that, as you can imagine. But that was really, as I what I'm thinking is really the only hiccup we had along the way. We were very fortunate.
That's great. Well, do you think that
Yeah,
if you were doing it again, and I know that you're in the where you are now, you're involved. Would that be something that you would recommend for a new designer or a maybe new to an area or somebody who just wants to get kind of recharged? Do you think that that would be something you would tell them, hey, don't just go, but volunteer?
definitely. I think any experience you have in being involved with AIGA is a successful experience. Any kind of ins and outs that you can get, um, even if it's helping set up or helping take down. A lot of chapters I know will let you in for free if you can help set up and take down. But just being part of the chapter and just being involved and going to as many events as possible is just it's a huge bonus. And I know a lot of the chapters have like student portfolio reviews or like a mentoring program. I think those are really important to be involved in any way, because my hope my with my past, I went from Louisiana to New York to South Carolina and now Ohio, and AIGA has been the constant thread for me. That's always been there. Except South Carolina, it wasn't there. I had to make it there, but it was there. But if you're a student and you go to school in a certain state and then you want to branch out and go somewhere else, there's bound to be an AIGA chapter somewhere nearby. That's an instant connection. It's an instant portal for you to tap into and be able to get your foot on the ground. So I think it's really important to stay connected to AIGA, and it's a line on your resume that no matter where you go, everyone, even out of the country, people know AIGA. It's a very well respected organization.
So what about I have just a couple more questions. Um, what about the how much would you in the beginning when you didn't really have a chapter or it was very new and you were trying to get big speakers to come in, did you have to pay them or just pay their way? And then the other question is if you when you were just calling them, were you or Bob calling them and being like, hey, we have an AIGA chapter, would you like to come and speak on Thursday, whatever, whatever date? Was that, I mean, that would have been nerve wracking. Did you get in touch with them or was it through email or?
Yes, there were a couple speakers that asked to be paid. There were a couple speakers that we paid, a couple speakers we said we just don't have it in our budget to pay. Most 90%, there were only two speakers that we paid. 90% of them, the rest of them, it was just paying their way. We paid for their hotel, we paid for their meal, the dinner that night, and then that was it. And they all know it's AIG is a nonprofit. They're doing it, to better the community. They were totally fine with it. Um, so that worked out fine. The second question, I knew I was going to forget what it was.
About calling,
What was your second
calling
question?
and being like,
Oh, right.
hey,
Yeah, that was fun. For some reason, I've never had a problem emailing other people. If I had to get on the phone, that would be an issue. When I was a student at LSU, I emailed David Carson to come and be our like guest judge for our senior show, and I remember my teachers thinking, "You're insane if you think he's going to come." Well, it turns out he did come, and he had brought books for everybody, and he was just typical David Carson. But that was kind of like a precursor to everything that what happened to in my life is, yeah, I got David Carson to come to LSU, and yeah, I emailed Chip Kidd, hey, can you come to South Carolina, and James Victory, and I did it by email. I just emailed him and just said, here's our calendar, here are the months that we have open, and the whole trick was getting them far enough in advance because they're so busy. So a lot of the times, like James Victoria, I think we had him booked 8 months in advance. Michael Beirut, I think, was a year in advance. But what was good about that is we could talk about it at every event. Michael Beirut's coming in June and it's September, get ready.
right.
But because of that, it would get people excited about it. So yes, I emailed them to set up all the details, and then usually I picked them up at the airport and just kind of hung out with them until it was time for the event. So getting people to come wasn't that big of an issue. It wasn't an obstacle. That wasn't hard. That was actually fun.
Did they usually leave that next morning?
Yep. So they would spend the night, Thursday night, and then Joshua Ramos was the only one that did not, the architect. His dad lived in North Carolina. So he went, I think his dad came to the event and then he drove with his dad. So everyone else would stay in a hotel right by USC, and and then they would fly out the next morning.
Cool. Okay, so um, I'm very encouraged for one, totally. So I appreciate you talking to
Good.
me about this. I hope it encourages some other people as well. I definitely think AIGA is such a great event, and I have gone to some smaller events. They were national, but they were like in Austin, and it was like a design
Yeah.
camp, and so it felt it was. They have these really big events, and then they have the local events, but then there's also those that are kind of feel like they're more regional, but it's more in depth, and you get one-on-ones, or you get 15 on one with some of these really amazing people. And I would definitely
Yeah.
suggest people checking those things out too. I like that they're offering different things at different levels that are
Right.
some are just one night, some are 4 days, and then some are 2 days or something. I think everybody's different, and it's nice to be met on different levels for sure. But so there was
Yeah.
one more image. I don't want us to forget an image.
Oh,
Oh, there's the in show.
yeah, that's the booklet that went out the night of our gala. So those are thumbnails of all of the pieces that were chosen in the show. So what we did was we brought in three judges, and usually one of the judges was the speaker for our September or October event, and the gala was in November. So one of the speakers was one of the judges. So he would speak on one night in October, and then the next morning would spend the whole day at a local photographer studio where we had all the submissions set up, and we had plastic cups turned over on all the pieces, and the three judges would go by with either a red chip and a green chip, so it's either you're in or you're out. And the pieces that were all green were in, and these are thumbnails from the booklet that everybody got that night of pieces that made it in the show. And so
Cool.
it was a neat event, and show's a fun one.
That's great. Um, let's see. I'm gonna clap up here your Twitter. And then if you
Yep.
guys don't know, Instagram is now you can actually use it on the computer. I believe it went live this week. And then you can also follow Nikki there. And I definitely suggest that because she posts awesome pictures. It's on Twitter too, you can see those. But I like the visual nature of Instagram, so definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Follow her blog. She has great stuff, and you can actually add in. You can send her some images. She's also on Pinterest, so you can check her out there too. And then this is for me. You can, if you want to know more about Design Recharge, it's designrecharge.org, and also Diane at designrecharge.org. And Todd, I'm glad you got to come. Hopefully, you'll get to listen to the rest of it for sure. He's locally here with me. He's at another college in
Okay.
Mobile, and so him and I
Okay.
have met, and we would like to do something. So now I feel like I can maybe do it now. So
If you have somebody on your side that'll be willing to help, that I mean, like my relationship with Bob, I mean, that's what sealed the deal is that we both were committed 100%, and it made it so much fun. It's if you start pointing fingers and people getting catty with each other, it totally takes the fun out of it. So if you're able to join forces with somebody who truly cares about having a chapter, it'll make it so much fun. And then just keeping it going, just having a lot of events. That's how you get the community involved and supportive.
definitely. Well, I'm
But
I
I was going to mention one more thing that just I think the thing that made a lot of difference too was asking local creatives in the community what kind of events they wanted to see and responding to that. Don't just ask and not do it, but really listening to what they want and trying to answer those requests because that made a huge difference.
Well, then you have buy-in already. You already know what they're wanting.
Right.
I am with you on that, and I'm all about that for here as well. So if you want to get in touch with me, tell me something that you want to see on Design Recharge, and of course, it's not showing up. You have to hit the little more button over there in the corner. But there's me on Facebook, Design Recharge on Facebook, and then Design Recharge on Instagram. But I am very willing. I am looking to try and get Marius Valdez asked me to find somebody to help with grant writing. So I'm going to have a show about grant writing because I think a lot of us just as artists we have as designers we have a passion for something, and maybe even if you're not at a university you want to do a project and it might benefit the community or something. So I am on that, and hopefully we'll get somebody soon. But next week we're having a lawyer is going to come and talk to us. He's a big spreecaster. He's in Southern California. His name's Mitch Jackson. He's going to help talk to us about contracts because boy, are contracts important for designers for sure. But and
Yes.
I agree with you, Nikki. It's really important to have it kind of long term. I have to kind of schedule things out. A lot of people, are busy right now, so you kind of have to. I don't have a year in advance, but I have a few. I have at least a month in advance, usually always planned out. Thankfully, because it makes it less stressful for sure. But Nikki,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thanks for encouraging me and hopefully encouraging lots of other people. And if you have questions or comments, please let Nikki or I know, and we will have her back on again because she's always such a great guest. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope it helped. And it was great to have you, Andy, and Into Persuasion. So hopefully you guys had a good time, and Todd, hopefully you can catch the rest on the replay. And I'll see you guys next week, same time, 2:30 Eastern time, 11:30 Pacific. And thanks again, Nikki, so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.